Are you ready? You good? Okay. Please, can I have a huge, warm welcome to Nicole Chenick?
Hi, I'm Nicole. Thank you. I'm not of this land. People get when I'm here. People get unusually excited when I tell them that I am from Canada. I have one guy who I met the other day. I told him where I was from, and he just gave me a hug, and he was like, "Oh my God, we love you guys." And I was like, "Yeah, we're pretty much in England's bitch." So thank you. But I'm from Alberta, which is pretty much known as Canada's Texas because all they care about there is oil and farming and Jesus, which is really great. And it's really fun. And the town that I'm from, Grand Prairie, where I grew up, fun fact, we're actually the violent crime capital of Canada, which I thought was really interesting because we are also the fourth most romantic city in Canada, which really puzzled me at first because I wasn't sure if, the two statistics were correlated, if that if violence is inherently romantic, it's Alberta, I don't know. But and then I sort of wondered how are they getting the ratings for which cities in Canada are most romantic, because there are a lot of them in Alberta, and I was like, that doesn't make sense because Alberta is a wasteland shithole. And so it's based on the amount of purchases made at romance stores, which is another fancy way of saying sex shops, which suddenly made a lot of sense. So that is where I'm from. And another sort of, the other part of that, there's, the violence and sex shop part of Alberta, and then there's also the Jesus side. So I'm from a Catholic family. I went to Catholic school, which was a scarring experience. So I have a lot of beef with the Catholic Church, because pretty much their strategy with Catholic school is they're like, okay, so we're gonna brainwash these kids until they get to about 12 years old. They pledge their allegiance to Jesus, and then they realize that a lot of the stuff we taught them is really fucked up. So that happened to me. I'm baptized Catholic, and I've had confirmation, which is when you swear your allegiance to Jesus. And now I don't know how I get out of that. I don't know how to unsubscribe to Jesus. So that's sort of always in the back of my mind, and it haunts me every day. But when I was about in grade 2, so I was about 8 years old, I actually I thought that Catholicism was the shit. I really wanted to be a nun. I was yeah, I'm gonna devote my life to God. That sounds the best career you could ever have, And then I kind of I went with that for a really long time. It's actually a stupid long time. I was I went through I didn't have a scene phase. It was a Jesus phase. And so then it just got to a point where I thought about everything I'd gone through in Catholic school. I was wow, that stuff is really fucked up. We had, when I was in grade 6 now, so I was about 12 years old, we had there was a group that did a tour of all the Catholic schools in Alberta, and they talked to us about abortion. So first thing they did, they brought in a quilt, a hand stitched quilt, and it's still in the school that I went to this day. It says Prayers for Life and Abortion, and it has a Mary, and she's holding baby Jesus, and they gave all of us a presentation on abortion is sin, God will hate you if you have an abortion. It was an hour and a half, and none of us knew what abortion was. We went through that entire presentation being having no clue what they were talking about, except that it was really, really bad. So it was the Pavlov, with the dog and the bell, and it drools when you ring the bell. That was us. If someone said abortion, we're no, it's sin. So I also got the really great experience of Catholic school sex ed, which, if you've gone through that, is basically they taught us, they're like, these are the stages of pregnancy, which like doesn't concern you because you're not going to have sex until you're married. So they would like hand out like these models of like babies during the development of like the child in the uterus, and like it was like made of some sort of like gelatin like substance. It was like an alien baby. It literally wasn't even the color of like a human child. It was like a blue like gelatin baby that they're like, this is what it looks like. And then like I was like, I don't want this growing inside of me, so I still don't want children. But and it's basically just like, like abstinence. Like, no, they gave us like a piece of gum. They're like, okay, chew the piece of gum, spit it out. Does anyone want that? And we're like, no. They're like, that's your virginity. Yeah. I was like 14, like it wasn't like, so that was really fun. And then when I was 15, I moved to, I went to a boarding school in Vancouver Island in British Columbia. And Vancouver Island is like the most liberal place like in Canada. Basically everyone there is a vegan or a stoner or a poli-sci major. And so, and you would think like boarding school is super conservative, but they were not. They brought like all of the grade 10s. We like filed into the auditorium, like our huge theater that fits like 500 people. The nurse like walks up to the podium. She's like, okay, who wants to put the condom on the dildo? And I was like shocked. I was like, you can say these words out loud, and they're like, yeah, like we have sex in the forest, it's so fine. We do. So, yeah, I went to boarding school for 3 years before I came here. Boarding school is a really interesting experience because, you would think like, when you think boarding school, you think it's just like filled with rich white kids, and that's exactly true. And it was really interesting, even like as a white person, it was really interesting to observe those kinds of people, because, and like white people jokes are probably like my favorite because like all of them are true. Like all of the white people stereotypes, like my best friend can't drink pumpkin spice lattes because they're too spicy. She cried because it was too spicy for her. So, and I like to joke about how white I am all the time because like I don't think I've like this part of my arm has seen the sun like since I've been born. I'm like the whitest person I know. I glow in the dark. And it's like it's really hard. It's really hard to be white. It's really hard shopping for like makeup because like even the like palest shade of foundation is like not white enough for me. And when I do find, like, makeup that does fit my skin tone, it's always, like, the names just, like, crack me up because they're all, like, really white things. It's like, oh, alabaster, ivory, gentrification, cocaine, like, so, white people, am I right? Speaking of white people, I don't think we talk about Donald Trump enough. So I'm going to talk about him now. I actually can't wait until like I'm a bit older and I can say like, oh, like I remember exactly where I was during the 2016 election because like I seriously will never forget because that was like the most soul-crushing experience of my life. I remember I had just come back from, we had a school holiday and everyone was sort of coming back from break. And we're sitting in the common room watching the TV. We're watching the election, and like every single time a state went red, it like a part of me died, and it's still not come back. And like most of the school, like most people on Vancouver Island are pretty liberal, but like it is a school full of rich white kids, so we do have some pretty conservative people there too. And this one girl was sort of going on about how, oh, I think Donald Trump will be a great president. He speaks his mind. Hillary Clinton belongs in jail because of the emails in Benghazi and like all that. I don't know. And I avoid conflict at like actually at all costs. Like if somebody yells at me, like it's honestly a miracle that I don't vaporize on the spot. Like, so I sort of stayed out of it. But my friend just got so fed up, and she said, how could you justify having a rapist in the Oval Office? And this girl like doesn't even hesitate. She's like, I'd rather have a rapist than a criminal. Which like, and like first, like, does someone ever say something like so stupid? You like, you know the Windows reboot, you have the complete like system like shut down, and like that happened to me in that moment. I had to leave the room and I laughed for 2 minutes because that's fucking hilarious, and then I cried for 10. But I just thought that was really interesting because I didn't know that they decriminalized rape, which would make sense because, if they are going to decriminalize, something, it would be rape because they're not really putting a lot of people in jail for that in the first place. So it's not really, doesn't make that much of a difference. So thank you. I'm Nicole. I'm really glad my first time was with you guys.
Over there. Nicole, over there. Big applause for Nicole!